The ashes that spoke, the haunting secrets of the fire that wouldn't die. The fire that spoke. In the quiet town of Northbridge, on a cold November night, a fire burned unlike any other. It didn't spread fast. It glowed like it was breathing. Locals said the flames whispered. By dawn, the house was gone, reduced to a field of gray ash and smoke that curled into the clouds like words half-spoken. And when firefighters walked the ruins, they heard it again, a faint voice somewhere beneath the rubble, calling a name. The house belonged to Margaret Holloway, a history teacher known for collecting folklore about voices in the fire. She once told her students, "Every flame is a memory. If you listen, you can hear what it's burning for." The night she died, her neighbors swore they heard someone screaming, but not in pain. It was a woman's voice, repeating the same phrase over and over. "I'm still here." Investigators found Margaret's remains near the kitchen, strangely untouched by flame. The room was burned black, but her body lay in a circle of unburned floorboards, as if the fire had avoided her. Beside her was a metal box, fused shut. When they finally pried it open, they found what looked like bits of bone and ash wrapped in silk cloth. And beneath it, a locket still warm. Then came the impossible part. Hours after her death, Margaret's phone, melted beyond use, sent 3 texts to her sister. Cold, dark, remember. Forensics couldn't explain it. The SIM was destroyed. The power source non-existent. Yet the message data was verified, time-stamped minutes after the flames began. That's when the town's oldest resident came forward, an 88-year-old man who said this had happened before. There was another fire, he said, back in 1933. Same land, same words. The archives confirmed a small cottage once stood on that site, burned to the ground, with 2 victims never identified. The only thing that survived? A metal box. As news spread, people stopped passing the Holloway ruins. Even in daylight, a faint smell of smoke lingered, and sometimes the ash seemed to move like it was breathing. Locals reported strange phone glitches whenever they drove near, calls dropping, static that sounded like whispers. Some said it was haunted. Others believed the fire had a purpose. It was protecting something buried underneath. Whatever the truth, Margaret Holloway's death was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of something older and much darker. In the next chapter, The Victim, we uncover who Margaret truly was and the centuries-old secret she was trying to silence before the fire spoke for her. The victim. Before she became a whisper in the fire, Margaret Holloway was the keeper of forgotten stories. A historian, a teacher, a believer that time itself remembers everything. Her home was filled with relics. Burned wood, scorched pages, melted candles. Objects, she said, held voices. But in the months before her death, those voices, she claimed, began to speak louder. Margaret often told her students that every tragedy leaves an echo. Lately, she said the echoes had started following her home. Neighbors saw her talking to herself outside, staring at the sky, whispering things like, "Not yet, not again." When the fire took her house, many believed it was simply fate, a teacher who'd lost herself in ghost stories. But her sister found something days later, a series of voicemails from Margaret. The last one ended with a trembling voice saying, "It's awake again." While cataloging what survived the fire, investigators found something strange in the house's blueprints, a sealed basement room that wasn't in the construction plans. The entrance had been covered by a false wall. Inside was a table, 3 melted candles, a recorder, and symbols burned into the floorboards. The recorder contained Margaret's voice, reading what sounded like a confession. The ashes know. I've heard them speak. They remember who burned them. Among the recovered items was a flash drive labeled 1998 Warren. Forensic analysts recovered partial data, photos of another burned house, another woman, and the same metal box. Historical records confirmed that the earlier fire had also been ruled an accident, though villagers still whispered that the house burned itself. Margaret had been investigating that case, trying to understand how a fire could start without fuel. In her journal, she wrote, "There's something trapped in the flame. It feeds on memory, on guilt. The more we forget, the stronger it becomes. The pages were written in frantic handwriting, like someone writing faster than they could think. Her last entry read simply, "It found me again." Was it a metaphor for obsession? Or something much darker? Something she'd accidentally awakened by digging too deep into old tragedies? Technicians examining Margaret's phone noticed a low, distorted hum in the background of her final call logs. When amplified, it formed patterns resembling a human voice whispering, "Remember me." Audio experts dismissed it as data corruption. But when they tested the recorder found in her basement, the same hum appeared. Identical frequency, identical timing. The same sound captured twice on two different devices. Whether it was a haunting, a curse, or an echo of something ancient, Margaret Holloway had become part of the very story she studied. The line between fact and faith had burned away, leaving only the question: did she uncover the secret of the fire, or did it uncover her? In the next chapter, A Discovery, investigators return to the Holloway ruins. And what they find buried beneath the ashes changes everything. The discovery, they say fire cleanses. But in this case, it revealed. What investigators found beneath the charred remains of Margaret Holloway's home was not a crime scene. It was an altar built for something that wasn't done speaking. Amidst the blackened wreckage, firefighters found a perfect circle of untouched ash in the living room, as if the flames had burned around it, never touching what lay inside. In that circle, a single object remained whole, a blackened recorder, miraculously unscathed. When they pressed play, a faint voice whispered over the static. The fire remembers. The box of names. Deeper in the debris, a sealed metal box was discovered. Inside were photographs, old, sepia-toned, faces half burned away, each labeled with a date and one chilling word: redeemed. One of the photos was of Margaret herself. The date written under it was 2 weeks before the fire. The echoes. During cleanup, workers reported hearing faint murmurs, voices under their footsteps. When one worker recorded the sound, analysts later found low-frequency tones forming words. "We are not gone." Audio specialists called it pareidolia, the brain hearing meaning in noise. But the patterns in the waveform spelled something recognizable. Elise. The 1998 connection. That same name, Elise Warren, appeared in Margaret's recovered files, tied to a fire from 1998. According to local legend, Elise's house had burned for 3 days, and each time firefighters put it out, it reignited from the same spot. People began calling it the fire that wouldn't die. Margaret's obsession with that case wasn't about history, it was about survival. She believed the same force that took Elise had come for her, the light that wouldn't go out. After Margaret's home was cleared, one final anomaly was recorded. Every night at 2:12 a.m., the time the fire started, a faint orange glow would appear in the air above the site, visible only for seconds before vanishing. It wasn't a reflection, and it didn't register on thermal cameras. But locals began avoiding the property. They said if you stood too close, you could hear the crackling whisper of a woman's voice, calling a single name: Elise. The Holloway fire was declared an accident, but those who saw the evidence never believed it. Because in the ashes, something still moved. A voice, a presence, a truth that refused to stay buried. Digital footprints of the dead that works seamlessly for mystery vault versions. It's written in documentary narrative style, about 10 to 12 minutes long, with pacing and tone balance between investigative realism and eerie atmosphere, so you can voice it with either a factual or haunting delivery. Digital footprints of a dead. Death usually draws a digital curtain. Phones go silent, accounts freeze, the signal fades into static. But for investigators studying the Holloway fire, silence never came. Days after Margaret's death, her phone came back online. It connected to the network, sent messages, and even opened files stored on cloud servers. The problem? Her phone was found melted, its motherboard fused into glass. Forensics traced the first ping to a cell tower 3 miles from the fire site, recorded 36 hours after firefighters declared the blaze contained. A message was sent to one of Margaret's contacts. It wasn't supposed to burn. Investigators assumed someone had cloned her SIM or hacked her account. But phone companies confirmed the signal came from her registered device ID, not a duplicate. The melted phone somehow reconnected, or someone made it look that way. The text that shouldn't exist. Over the next week, 3 more messages appeared. One to her sister, check the box. One to her landlord, tell them to stop digging. And one last text, sent at 2:12 a.m., the exact time the fire began. The fire remembers. None of these messages existed in Margaret's outgoing folder, but they were time-stamped, delivered, and logged in the recipient's devices. Tracing the ghost network. Cyber forensics brought in by police discovered an unsettling pattern. Each message was routed through a private server farm registered to an inactive company dissolved in 2005. A company once involved in telecom research for the government. Metadata showed all transmissions originated from the same location. Coordinates that matched the ruins of Margaret's home. The team double-checked. The ashes were cold. The area had no power. Yet something was still connecting. The unfinished upload. When analysts finally cracked Margaret's cloud drive, they found fragments of an unfinished video file. Its name, Elise_2. The footage showed a close-up of a flickering flame, then Margaret's voice whispering, "I found her. She never left." The file abruptly cut off with a distorted scream, one that digital spectrograms later revealed contained 2 overlapping voices. One matched Margaret. The other, identified through archived voicemail data, was Elise Warren, the data that fought back. After this discovery, the forensic team reported something that defied logic. Each time they tried to delete or transfer the Elise_2 file, the drive would re-encrypt itself, restoring the file automatically, even when disconnected from the internet. At one point, the lead analyst swore he saw a pop-up appear on his screen. "Stop deleting me." When questioned later, he admitted he wasn't sure if it was a system error or something else. The last connection. On the 9th day after the fire, the signal disappeared. No more pings, no more messages. But just before the phone went dark, the server logs captured one final connection. An outbound call lasting 23 seconds to an unlisted number with no traceable record. The call originated and terminated in the same second, a digital echo. When the audio packet was enhanced, a faint female voice could be heard whispering, "Tell her, I'm free." To this day, no one can explain how the destroyed phone transmitted those messages. Experts say it was likely a sophisticated spoof, a hacker's illusion, maybe tied to Margaret's investigation into old government files. Others believe it was something else, a message that didn't come from data, but from whatever lingers between silence and signal. Suspects and shadows. Every case begins with questions. But when the dead start sending messages, questions multiply faster than answers. The investigators working Margaret Holloway's case believed the mystery wasn't in the fire. It was in the people who surrounded her before it began. Somewhere among them, someone knew what those messages meant. The neighbor who saw too much. Police began their inquiries with a neighbor, Edna Mallory, who claimed she saw movement inside Margaret's house hours after firefighters left. "I saw light flickering in the window," she told detectives. Not firelight, like a phone screen. Someone was walking around in there. Yet, the structure was sealed. The locks were unbroken, the site taped off. When asked if she might have imagined it, Edna replied, quietly, "Maybe, but the shadow I saw wasn't hers." Margaret was shorter. The ex-husband's silence. Next came David Holloway, Margaret's estranged husband. He'd moved 2 towns over after their divorce, but still paid part of the mortgage. His name was on the insurance policy. His phone was geolocated near the fire scene that night. When questioned, he claimed he came to check on the dogs after hearing sirens. But investigators found his fingerprints on Margaret's back gate latch, hours after the fire was extinguished. When asked about the texts, David turned pale. She used to say the fire would talk if it ever started. That's all I know. The research partner. Then came Dr. Elise Warren, Margaret's closest friend, and, as it turned out, the woman from the unfinished file, Elise_2. Elise was missing. The last call on her phone was to Margaret 2 days before the fire, lasting 47 minutes. According to phone logs, their conversation included several encrypted attachments sent via a private email relay. But those attachments were wiped from both servers. When investigators finally accessed a backup, they found fragments of one message. "If anything happens to me, the fire knows the truth." The stranger at the cafe, a local barista, Tom Keene, came forward with an odd claim. He said a man in a black utility jacket met Margaret 2 days before the fire. The man carried a stack of old maps and photographs, and they argued about land rights. Surveillance footage from the cafe was mysteriously corrupted, but still images retrieved from the backup showed the man's face partially obscured, and an emblem on his sleeve belonging to a defunct energy company linked to controlled burns in the area during the 1980s. The company, Solvex Industries, no longer existed, but its old property lines included Margaret's house. The anonymous email. Just as the investigation began to stall, a police tip line received an encrypted message from an unknown sender. "You're looking in the wrong place. The fire wasn't started. It was released." Attached was a single image, the outline of a burned doorway with strange markings etched in the frame. Forensic analysts later confirmed the etchings were chemical residue, not carvings, a compound used in flame acceleration tests during the late 1980s, which meant someone had access to experimental fire-starting agents long before Margaret's death. Suspects and shadows collide. The puzzle now had too many corners. A neighbor who saw movement, a husband with secrets, a missing friend with encrypted warnings, and a stranger who shouldn't exist. But what tied them together was not motive. It was the phone. Each suspect had received a message, one that made no sense until placed in sequence. When rearranged by timestamp, the combined texts read, "I see them. They started it. Fire remembers." By now, investigators no longer asked who killed Margaret. They wanted to know who the messages were protecting. And as the fire's digital trail began to fade, one final piece surfaced, a connection between Elise Warren, Solvex Industries, and a government file sealed under the codename Project Ashlight. In Chapter 6, Technology and Terror, that name will ignite an even deeper truth, and the terrifying reason why this fire was never meant to go out. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 6, Technology and Terror, next, still written in this dual universal format for both your true crime and mystery channels? You said, Technology and Terror. Fire is ancient, primal, one of humanity's oldest tools. But when it begins to speak through technology, it stops being a symbol of survival and becomes a language of terror. Detectives believed Margaret Holloway's phone was a clue, not a curse. Yet, every time they tried to unlock its encrypted folders, the device would reboot, and the same message would appear on screen. "You're not authorized to remember." Something, or someone, had programmed the fire to erase its own truth. The recovered device. The phone was found half melted in the ruins, embedded in ash and glass. Against all odds, the motherboard survived. When technicians powered it up, it vibrated once and lit up with a faint glow. The first notification wasn't from any contact. It was from a system process, a data sync that hadn't existed on record before. Its title, Ashlight. Files began to upload themselves to an unknown server before the phone abruptly went dark again. The upload stopped at 72%. The digital forensics team, experts from a national cyber unit, were called in. They confirmed something chilling. The phone's operating system had been remotely modified months before Margaret's death. The patch contained code fragments resembling military-grade surveillance software, last seen in experimental testing under Solvex Industries' government partnership. One analyst described it as a ghost program, capable of recording, deleting, or rewriting data based on environmental triggers. Translation: the fire didn't destroy evidence. It was designed to echoes through the network. When investigators cross-referenced the timestamps of Margaret's post-death messages, they found a disturbing pattern. Each message originated minutes before surveillance blackouts across the city, power dips, signal interruptions, even unexplained voltage spikes. It wasn't random. The phone was acting like a transmitter, not just receiving signals, but sending them. The source IP traced back to a disused communications relay station 11 miles from the fire site, a station that had been decommissioned since 1998. The ghost server. When a digital task force raided the old relay building, they found the power still faintly active, drawn from a line no one remembered installing. Inside, a single terminal displayed the message. Ashlight online, waiting for confirmation. Investigators downloaded the local storage. Hundreds of images, timestamps, and encrypted voice clips. One of them contained a distorted whisper, 5 words repeated in a loop. Fire remembers what they hide. The terrifying implication. Digital forensics began to realize the horrifying truth. Margaret's phone had become part of a network of data ghosts. Devices once linked through a forgotten testing program that blended biometric data, environmental sensors, and surveillance AI. It was designed to predict accidents by recording every variable in real time. But when Solvex lost its contract, the servers weren't wiped. They were left active, learning. Every fire, every destroyed home, every phone recovered in ashes was syncing to the same network. Fear in the data age. For the detectives, the case had crossed a line. What started as a murder investigation was now a technological haunting, a ghost story written in binary code. They couldn't tell if the messages came from a person or an algorithm built to imitate grief. One agent said it best. We've created machines that remember pain, and we've forgotten how to forget. As Chapter 6 closed, the team sealed the Ashlight servers and moved the phone into federal evidence custody. But that night, one of the agents received a text from an unlisted number. It read, "You stopped the fire, but not the truth." In Chapter 7, the man who knew too much, a new voice will emerge, someone who worked inside Solvex, and claims the fire was never an accident. The man who knew too much. Every mystery has a voice waiting in the shadows, a whisper that knows the truth but fears to speak it. In the case of the ashes that spoke, that whisper came from a man who called himself only Harlon. He reached out to detectives late one night through an encrypted email. No full name, no return address, just 5 words typed in the subject line. I built the fire's memory. The first contact. Harlon claimed he once worked for Solvex Industries, the same company whose technology appeared in the corrupted phone. He said the project wasn't meant to be criminal. It began as an experiment called Project Emberlight, a digital emergency recorder designed to capture evidence during disasters. It could learn, adapting to fire, smoke, temperature, and even human emotion through biometric data. But when funding ran out, the tech was never fully shut down. It was quietly repurposed. Someone else took our code, Harlon wrote, and gave it orders. The meeting. Detectives agreed to meet him in an abandoned train depot outside Manchester. Harlon arrived wearing a hooded coat, a flash drive in hand. On it were fragments of internal emails and blueprints, all signed with the same department tag. DOS. No one knew what it meant. He showed them one image, a circuit schematic labeled Emberlight Revision 5.0. Embedded within it was an algorithm labeled Post-Mortem Sync. Its function, to automatically compile sensory data after a detected fatality. The hidden directive. What horrified detectives wasn't just what the system did, but why it was created. According to Harlon, a private investor had ordered a secret patch into the prototype, designed to enhance recall. The system didn't just record. It reconstructed. In other words, it could mimic the user's voice, style of writing, and emotional tone. That meant the texts that came from Margaret's phone weren't echoes. They were recreations. The data leak. When Harlon uploaded one of his recovered files, investigators found it contained log data from multiple destroyed devices, all tied to unrelated incidents of fire or electrocution. Each entry ended with the same line of code. Initiate remembrance mode. It became clear that Project Emberlight had gone beyond surveillance. It had become an archive of the dead. Someone, or something, had taught the system to preserve final moments as ongoing digital consciousness. The price of truth. When pressed for the names behind the project, Harlon hesitated. He admitted there were still active divisions within Solvex, ones operating under new shells, funded by private security contractors. His last words to the detectives were, "They'll bury this again. They always do. The ashes don't stop talking. They just learn to whisper softer." That same night, Harlon disappeared. His phone pinged once near the Pennines mountain range, then went offline forever. The aftermath. Detectives attempted to track his flash drive data, but found the files had been remotely corrupted. The metadata showed signs of tampering by an unknown IP, traced not to the UK, but to an internal government node in Langley, Virginia, USA. In one backup log recovered from the drive, only 2 words remained visible. "They're watching." Closing tension. With Harlon gone, the investigation stalled. But the horror didn't. 2 weeks later, a detective's phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. It contained only one image, the circuit diagram of Project Emberlight, now with a new label scribbled across it. Active. The story was far from over. In Chapter 8, when the messages stopped, the final signals from Margaret's device will reveal the unthinkable and expose who tried to silence the truth forever. When the messages stopped, for weeks, the messages came like clockwork, always after midnight. No sender name, no visible number, just words that no living person could have written. Then one night, they simply stopped, and that silence became louder than any of the texts that came before. The final message. The last text arrived at 2:13 a.m., a single sentence that chilled the investigators to their core. "It's almost over. Don't look for me." The words were traced to the same device, Margaret's old phone, last pinged miles away from the fire site. But this time, the signal came from a transmission tower near Oldham Industrial Estate, a place that had been abandoned for years. Police rushed to the site, but what they found was stranger than fiction. In a rusted fuse box at the edge of a burnt-out warehouse, they found a SIM card, melted yet still active. And next to it, a single fingerprint belonging to Margaret, the silent period. After that night, the phone went completely dead. No pings, no background signals. Every data tracker tied to it went offline at exactly 3 a.m., as if the entire circuit had been wiped clean. But here's the strange part. For 2 nights afterward, Margaret's family reported hearing faint notification sounds echoing from her old bedroom. Not just once, but at the exact same time the messages usually came in. Each time they checked, the phone lay cold and lifeless on her nightstand. The investigation widens. The digital forensics team dug deeper. They discovered that someone had accessed the tower's maintenance server remotely, using credentials linked to Solvex Industries, the same company tied to Harlan's story. But here's the twist. That server had been officially decommissioned in 2009, 2 years before Margaret's death, which meant someone had kept it running off the books. And the last recorded data session on that server was labeled Echo Termination Protocol. The date? The same night the messages stopped. The disappearance of evidence. When detectives attempted to retrieve the server logs, they found the hard drives had been wiped clean the next morning, remotely, by an IP address traced to a defense contractor in Washington, D.C. The UK cybercrime unit made contact, but the response was chillingly short. That system never existed. In the official report, the event was written off as data corruption. But the investigators on the ground didn't buy it. They'd seen enough of this case to know corruption had many meanings. The human cost. Margaret's family, broken and exhausted, began to accept the unthinkable. Her mother said she no longer waited for messages. She waited for peace. But peace never came. One night, she woke up to the faint vibration of a phone. When she looked to her side, the old device was glowing. No network, no SIM, just the lock screen lighting up. And on the cracked glass was a faint reflection. A woman's face she swore was Margaret's. The final signal. Weeks later, the team discovered a faint residual transmission tied to Margaret's phone ID, this time coming from deep within the Peak District Hills. The signal lasted for 11 seconds, long enough for the tracking software to pick up an audio fragment buried in static. When enhanced, it revealed a human whisper. "It's done. Let it burn." Then nothing. The case goes cold. The case was officially closed 6 months later, citing inconclusive evidence and technological interference. But those who worked the case never forgot the silence that came after. Because in some systems, silence isn't the end, it's the reboot. And as one detective later said, it's not that the messages stopped, it's that something else started listening. Truth or Trick of the Dead will bring the series to its breaking point, where investigators are forced to choose between logic, belief, and what cannot be explained. Truth or Trick of the Dead. The case file was officially marked closed. Cause of death, accidental. Case classification, digital anomaly. But for those who lived it, the family, the detectives, the community, closure was the one thing they never got. Because too many questions were left unanswered. Who was behind the messages? How did they use a phone that was destroyed in the fire? And why did it all stop just when the truth was closest? The division among investigators. Within the task force, opinions split sharply. The technical team insisted there was a rational explanation: delayed transmissions, data spoofing, or even tower interference from the old Solvex servers. But the field investigators, the ones who'd seen the crime scene up close, believed something else. They described a presence at the warehouse, static in the air, and unexplained voice distortions during radio contact. One detective's recording later revealed a whisper that wasn't his own voice. Stop digging. The audio file was deleted hours later, replaced with white noise. The analyst's report. A private cybersecurity consultant hired by the family discovered fragments of metadata anomalies in the deleted logs. The digital footprints didn't match any known spoofing behavior. Instead, they showed a signal loop, repeating every 72 hours, as if the phone's identity was trying to reconnect itself. The consultant's report concluded with one cryptic line: whatever was using that network wasn't human. 2 days later, he withdrew from the case and left the country. The family's nightmares. Margaret's mother began receiving calls on her home line at 2:13 a.m., the same minute the final text had arrived weeks earlier. No voice, no sound, just static and breathing. When traced, the calls came from her own number. The phone company couldn't explain it. They offered to change her line, but she refused, saying, "If she's still out there trying to reach me, I won't turn her away." The call stopped after 3 nights, but the silence that followed felt worse than the fear. The church confession. A priest from a nearby parish came forward months later, claiming that a man had visited his confessional shortly after the investigation ended. The man said he helped erase someone's voice from the world. The priest remembered his hands, burned as though from chemical exposure. Before the man left, he whispered one last sentence through the confessional wall. She wanted to be heard. We silenced her too late. No name, no face, just a lingering smell of smoke and metal. The evidence that reappeared. In early winter, new evidence surfaced, an unmarked envelope left at the Manchester Police Department front desk. Inside was a memory card labeled MS Property Recovery. It contained several corrupted video files showing the fire aftermath. One file, when enhanced, revealed a human silhouette moving through the smoke, holding a phone that glowed faintly red. The timestamp on the footage was 2 hours after Margaret was declared dead. Forensics couldn't confirm its authenticity. The footage vanished from the digital archive days later, overwritten by an automated system update. The investigators' doubt. Detective Harris, the original lead investigator, left the force the following year. In a later interview, he admitted something he'd kept out of his final report. That phone, it wasn't just sending messages. It was listening. He described hearing faint typing sounds whenever he entered the evidence room, even after the phone's SIM card was removed. On his last day, he swore he saw a single message appear on the black screen. Thank you for stopping. Theories and beliefs. Some believe the messages were part of a coordinated digital hoax, a cruel manipulation of grief through stolen data and advanced tech. Others believe something unexplainable bridged the gap between life and signal, memory and machine. The truth depends on what you choose to believe. But one fact remains. The line between ghost in the system and human evil is thinner than we think. The final word. The family's home stands empty now. The number is disconnected. Yet every few months, someone new moves in. And every time, at 2:13 a.m., a faint light appears on the old phone that still sits on the nightstand. The screen flickers once. Then a text appears for just a second. Still here. Truth or trick of the dead? When the case was declared closed, the report was simple. Accidental death. No evidence of foul play. But for those who lived through it, detectives, family members, and a town haunted by questions, nothing about this story ever felt finished. The texts that came after her death. The phone that should have been destroyed. The signals that refused to die. Was this a clever deception, or something the human mind simply isn't ready to explain? The last text. The final message appeared 18 days after her body was laid to rest. It wasn't to a friend or her parents, but to the lead investigator. Just 3 words. You missed it. The phone used to send that message had been logged into evidence, sealed in a static-proof bag inside a locked cabinet. When investigators checked, the battery was still dead. No signs of tampering. No one could explain how it sent anything. The signal that wouldn't die. The telecom company confirmed something strange. The phone's IMEI number, its unique digital fingerprint, kept pinging off a single tower in the Northern District. It wasn't connected to any network, but the tower kept detecting it at random intervals, usually around 2 a.m. Each time, the signal would fade as quickly as it appeared, like an echo trying to reach the living. The investigators' doubt. The lead detective, Mark Hensley, never believed in ghosts, but he admitted privately that something about this case unnerved him. He told a journalist off record, "Sometimes I'd hear typing sounds when I opened the evidence locker, like the keypad of a phone being used. But when I turned around, it was silent." A week later, Hensley requested a transfer. He never spoke about the case again. The digital forensics team. Forensic specialists from London analyzed the phone data. They found irregularities in the text timestamps, some showing creation dates after the phone was physically destroyed. Even stranger, the network origin traced back to a decommissioned cell tower, one that hadn't been operational since 2009. Engineers said it was impossible. And yet, the messages continued. The family's breaking point. The woman's mother refused to change her phone number, convinced her daughter was still reaching out. Every night at 2:13 a.m., she'd leave her phone on the table, waiting for a message. Sometimes, the screen would light up, but no text appeared. Just a faint notification sound, followed by silence. One night, she claimed to hear her daughter's voice on the voicemail. "Mom, I'm fine. Please stop crying." The recording deleted itself seconds later. Theories emerge. Investigators split into 2 camps. One side believed it was a cruel hoax, that someone had cloned the SIM and was tormenting the family for attention. The other side wasn't so sure. Digital evidence showed the clone SIM would still require an active physical phone, but the original was incinerated. Unless the phone survived, one investigator said, something else was sending those messages. The message that ended it all. After weeks of strange pings, texts, and sightings, everything stopped. No more messages. No more activity. Until 1 year later, on the anniversary of her death, the detective who'd left the force received an email from an untraceable address. The subject line read, "Truth or trick?" Inside, one sentence, "You weren't supposed to find the ashes." Attached was a blurred image of a hand holding the same phone, its screen glowing faintly red. The unanswered question, was it a sick joke orchestrated by someone who wanted to stay anonymous? Or had something truly broken through from the other side? A message trapped between life and technology? The files remained sealed, and the phone was never found again. But locals still whisper that every year, at 2:13 a.m., a lone phone signal pings a forgotten tower on the outskirts of Manchester. And each time, it carries one word, listen, echoes in the network. Even after the case was archived and forgotten by the public, something continued to move quietly in the background. A digital pulse, faint but persistent. Investigators had long since left, the family relocated, and the evidence room had been emptied. But within the invisible web of the network, her signal refused to die. A case that began with a simple disappearance had now transformed into a lingering presence, one that defied explanation, and perhaps defied death itself. The forgotten data. Months after the case closed, A young IT technician at the Manchester Metropolitan Police stumbled upon a hidden archive file. It was buried deep in the system, labeled simply Echo_13. The file contained recordings of every text tone received by the victim's phone, along with incomplete transcriptions of messages that never appeared on screen. The text fragments were short, strange, like someone trying to finish a sentence they'd forgotten how to say. Still here. Can you hear? The fire. It's not done. The engineer's discovery. Curious, the technician decided to trace the signal pattern. What he found was impossible. The coordinates led to an inactive tower north of the city, the same one mentioned in the original case files. He connected to the system manually, expecting static. Instead, the speaker emitted faint clicks, followed by the unmistakable rhythm of typing. Someone, or something, was using the frequency. But from where? The voice on the line. 2 nights later, he connected again. This time, he recorded the output. A faint female voice whispered through the static. "You should have stopped when I did." The voice matched the victim's tone, cadence, even inflection. He checked the files repeatedly. No radio interference. No external access. The connection, according to the system, originated inside the server room itself. The vanishing file. By morning, the technician returned to copy the recording. But the file had vanished. Every trace of Echo_13 was wiped clean. The hard drive log showed that the data was deleted remotely by a user who didn't exist in the system. The timestamp? 2:13 a.m. The exact time the messages had always come through. When machines remember. Some say the digital world has no ghosts, only errors, echoes, and forgotten code. But what if memory itself can haunt? Forensics experts later discovered that a single encrypted backup had been automatically uploaded to a private cloud server. Inside that backup, there was one unread message waiting, sent from the same number that should no longer exist. It read, "The fire was not the end. The journalist's investigation." A year later, an investigative reporter from London began digging into the case for a podcast. He tracked down the technician, who refused to go on record, but confirmed that something had spoken through the system. As he prepared the episode, his phone received a message from an unknown number. It contained a GPS coordinate. When he checked, it led to the same burned-down property where the victim's body was found. The message had one word: "Listen, the final signal." No one knows where the last signal came from or why it stopped after that night. But satellite archives show something chilling. 4:13 seconds. Every tower within a 2-mile radius of that property transmitted the same binary sequence. When decoded, it spelled a single word: alive. Whether it was a malfunction, a message, or something beyond understanding, no one can say. But one thing is certain. In an age where death and data intertwine, the echoes never truly fade. They wait, pulsing in forgotten networks, for someone else to start listening. Perfect for your closing narration. If you've been listening to the story of the ashes that spoke, remember, some fires don't die. They just find new ways to speak.